What if the thing hunting you in the woods didn't need claws or teeth to kill you? What if it only needed your fear? That's the first thought that crossed Daniel's mind as the fire crackled and spat, sparks rising into the canopy of the Appalachian forest like tiny fireflies. He wouldn't admit it out loud, of course, because he was supposed to be the skeptic of the group, the one who always rolled his eyes when talk turned to ghost stories and folklore. But tonight, sitting in a circle with 3 of his closest friends, he couldn't shake the unease that came when Ethan leaned forward, his face half lit by the orange glow, and whispered, "They say the Hollow One walks these woods." The words hung in the air, and for a moment even the fire seemed to burn more quietly, as though listening. Hannah laughed nervously, pulling her jacket tighter around her shoulders. "Come on, Ethan. That's just some dumb campfire tale. Every forest has one. Jersey Devil, Mothman, Bigfoot, you name it. Locals gotta scare the tourists somehow, right?" But there was a tremor in her voice, subtle but there, the kind of forced casualness that betrayed unease. Maya, the quietest of the 4, didn't laugh. She kept her eyes on the treeline, the endless black wall of pine and oak that surrounded their little campsite. She was the one who had insisted on coming out here, away from the crowded, regulated campgrounds and into the more authentic wilderness. "It's not just a story," she said softly. "My grandmother told me about it when I was little. She grew up in these mountains. The Hollow One isn't like other legends. It doesn't claw you open or drag you off into the dark. It waits. It watches. And the more afraid you are, the stronger it gets." Daniel rolled his eyes, out of habit more than conviction. "So what, it feeds on fear? Like some Appalachian boogeyman version of a vampire? That's ridiculous." But he noticed the way Maya's hands trembled as she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way her gaze never wavered from the treeline. Ethan leaned back, smiling faintly. He loved this, the power of a good story to unsettle, to shake the armor of rationality his friends clung to. "They say its eyes are hollow. Not just empty, but hollow, like looking into the sockets of a skull. And if you meet its gaze too long, it doesn't need to touch you at all. It empties you out from the inside, until there's nothing left of you but," he trailed off, grinning at the tension tightening around the circle. "Well, that's the fun part, isn't it? No one ever really lives to describe it." The fire popped loudly, making Hannah jump. She cursed under her breath and shoved Ethan's shoulder. "You're such an ass. You just love making people squirm." "Guilty," Ethan admitted, raising his hands in mock surrender. But Daniel noticed that even he kept glancing toward the dark beyond the firelight. They ate their dinner in uneven silence after that, hot dogs roasted too long on sticks, half-burned marshmallows, the usual camping fare. The forest, which had felt welcoming earlier in the afternoon, when the sun still filtered through the canopy and the air buzzed with insects, now felt oppressive. Every shadow seemed too deep, every breeze through the leaves too much like a whisper. The night pressed in, and the fire felt like a fragile shield against something vast and unseen. Around midnight, Hannah announced she was going to bed. She zipped herself into her tent with a final, muttered, "Don't let Ethan tell any more stories." Maya followed shortly after, still silent, still staring at the trees. Daniel and Ethan remained by the fire, poking at the coals, the mood heavy. Daniel finally broke the silence. "You don't actually believe that crap, do you?" Ethan smirked, but it was thinner now, less certain. "Believe it? Nah. But it's fun to imagine. Makes the night interesting." He glanced at Daniel. "You looked spooked, though." "Please," Daniel scoffed. "I don't spook. I just think it's stupid to waste time on ghost stories when we've got actual bears out here. That's what we should be worried about." But even as he said it, his eyes betrayed him, drifting to the tree line, where the firelight ended and the forest began. For just a second, barely long enough to register, he thought he saw something pale between the trees. Not moving, not even shifting, just there. Watching. His breath caught, but when he blinked, it was gone. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, following his gaze. Daniel shook his head quickly. "Nothing. Thought I saw something. Just shadows. He forced a laugh. Your stupid story's probably messing with my head. They put the fire out not long after, dousing it with water until steam hissed and the clearing smelled of wet ash. The darkness that followed was suffocating. Their tents seemed small, fragile things against the vast weight of the forest. Daniel lay awake long after Ethan's steady breathing signaled he was asleep, listening to the night. The rustle of leaves. The occasional snap of a branch. The call of a distant owl. Normal forest sounds, he told himself. Perfectly normal. But then, something else. A sound he couldn't explain. Not footsteps, not quite. More like a dragging, a slow shifting weight across the forest floor. It was faint, almost swallowed by the night, but it was there. Moving, stopping, moving again. Getting closer. Daniel held his breath. The sound circled the campsite, slow, deliberate, as though whatever it was didn't care if it was heard. He wanted to sit up, to unzip the tent and shine his flashlight, but fear pinned him down. His heart hammered against his ribs. And then, silence. Complete and absolute. For a few long minutes, nothing. Until he heard it. A whisper. Barely audible, but sharp enough to freeze his blood. Daniel. His name. Spoken from just outside the tent. Daniel lay frozen beneath the thin nylon of his tent, every muscle tight with dread. He told himself he must have imagined it, that no one could have whispered his name from the darkness, not in that voice, low, almost guttural, but at the same time thin and hollow, like wind curling through a cracked window. His rational mind fought desperately to explain it away. It could have been the breeze. It could have been a dream. Maybe one of his friends was playing a trick on him. But even as the excuses formed, he knew deep down none of them fit. His friends were asleep. The woods were too still. And that whisper had carried a weight that pressed against his chest. It had known his name. His throat burned with the need to call out, to wake Ethan or Hannah or Maya, but some primal instinct screamed at him to stay silent. If he spoke, if he acknowledged what he had heard, it would know. It would come closer. He gripped his sleeping bag so tightly his knuckles ached, eyes fixed on the curved ceiling of the tent. Minutes crawled past like hours. The whisper didn't return, but the silence was worse somehow, like the forest itself had stopped breathing. Eventually, exhaustion dragged him under. His dreams were jagged, fractured images, the pale outline of a face with hollow eyes, endless black trees closing in around him, and the suffocating sensation of something crouching over him, its presence heavy but unseen. When he finally jolted awake, the first gray light of dawn filtered through the tent walls. The world outside was alive again, birds chattered, branches rustled in the breeze, the sound of Hannah boiling water drifted across the campsite. Relief came in a rush, but it was fleeting. Daniel unzipped his tent and stepped into the cool morning air, forcing himself to act normal, to smile at Hannah's cheerful morning, as she stirred instant oatmeal over the camp stove. Ethan emerged shortly after, rubbing his eyes and yawning loudly. Maya sat off to the side, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the trees like she hadn't slept at all. Rough night? Ethan asked her, stretching. Maya didn't look at him. Her voice was flat, distant. Did anyone else hear it? Daniel froze. Hear what? He asked carefully. Her eyes flicked toward him, dark and unblinking. Someone walking around. Outside the tents. Ethan groaned. Seriously? You're both letting my story get to you. There wasn't anyone out there. Just raccoons or something. Raccoons don't whisper names, Maya said. Daniel's stomach lurched, but he forced a laugh. Come on. It was probably just your imagination. I didn't hear anything. The lie felt heavy on his tongue, but he couldn't bring himself to admit what he'd heard. Not yet. Saying it aloud would make it too real. They packed up their breakfast and set off on a trail Maya had mapped out the night before. The forest was beautiful in the daylight, sunbeams cutting through the canopy, air filled with birdsong and the smell of pine. Daniel tried to let the normalcy soothe him, but unease gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. Every time he glanced at Maya, he caught her watching him, her expression unreadable, like she knew he was hiding something. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking a vast stretch of wilderness. The view was breathtaking, rolling hills blanketed in endless trees, the faint ribbon of a river glinting in the distance. Ethan whistled low. Now this is worth the hike. No ghosts out here, just fresh air and freedom. But as Daniel scanned the treeline below, something snagged at his vision. At first, it seemed like a trick of the light, a pale figure standing at the edge of the clearing far below, almost blending with the bark of the trees. It was motionless, too tall, too thin. Even from this distance, Daniel swore he saw the suggestion of dark hollows where its eyes should have been. He blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, looked again. The clearing was empty. "You okay?" Hannah asked, nudging him. He realized he'd been standing rigid, staring. "Yeah," he muttered. "Just thought I saw something." They hiked back in the late afternoon, shadows lengthening across the forest floor. By the time they returned to camp, a thick unease had settled over all of them. No one mentioned it, but their laughter felt forced, their conversations brittle. It was as though each of them sensed the same thing, that the woods were not empty, that something lingered just beyond sight. Night came quickly. The fire was built higher than before, flames leaping, as though they could push the darkness further away. They ate quietly, each lost in thought. Daniel caught Ethan glancing nervously toward the trees, his bravado from earlier dimmed. Hannah fiddled with her flashlight even while sitting by the fire, as though she needed its beam ready. And Maya hardly moved at all, her gaze fixed on the black wall of forest, lips pressed into a thin line. When bedtime came, Daniel lingered by the fire long after the others retired. He didn't want to crawl back into that tent, didn't want to feel trapped again while something prowled outside. But eventually, exhaustion won. He zipped himself in, heart hammering as he turned off his lantern and lay in the dark. The night was silent again. Too silent. Then it started. The same dragging sound across the forest floor. Slow, deliberate. Moving closer. Closer. He clutched his sleeping bag, sweat prickling his skin despite the chill. The sound stopped. Silence pressed down like a weight. And then, the voice. Clearer this time. Louder. "Daniel." He squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head. No. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. But then another voice came, a gasp from the next 10 over. Maya's voice. "Who's there?" she whispered. Silence. Then a long pause. And then Daniel heard her scream. The scream ripped through the stillness of the night, sharp and raw, cutting into Daniel like a blade. His whole body jerked upright, his heart thundering as he scrambled with the zipper of his tent. Ethan burst out of his own tent at the same time, flashlight beams slicing wildly through the trees, his voice cracking as he shouted, "Maya? What the hell happened?" Daniel stumbled into the clearing barefoot, his flashlight trembling in his grip. Hannah was already there too, her face pale, eyes wide with panic as she pointed at Maya's tent. She screamed. "I heard her, she hasn't come out." The three of them rushed toward the nylon cocoon, Daniel's chest constricting with dread. He expected to hear sobbing, or frantic movement, or even Maya's voice telling them she was fine. But there was nothing. No sound at all. The tent sat motionless, its fabric stirring only in the night breeze. "Maya?" Daniel called, trying to steady his voice. "It's just us. Open up." No answer. Hannah dropped to her knees, fumbling with the zipper, but Daniel caught her wrist. "Wait," he said, his voice low, his eyes flicking toward the treeline. The forest loomed around them, dark and suffocating. The fire had burned low, its embers casting little more than a dull glow. He couldn't shake the sensation that opening the tent too quickly might let something else out with her. Ethan cursed under his breath and yanked the zipper anyway. The flap fell open, revealing the dim beam of Maya's lantern still glowing inside. Her sleeping bag was half unzipped, her belongings scattered as if she'd moved suddenly, but the tent was empty. "She's gone," Hannah whispered, her voice trembling. "That's impossible," Daniel snapped, though his words rang hollow even to himself. "We'd have heard her." "We did hear her," she screamed. Ethan swept his flashlight across the ground, and the beam caught something that made Hannah gasp. Footprints. Bare, human footprints leading away from the tent and into the forest. The strange part wasn't that Maya had left without her boots, it was the way the tracks looked. The soil was damp, soft enough to hold impressions, but these prints seemed unnaturally deep, pressed with a weight that didn't belong to someone her size. "Those don't look right," Ethan muttered, his voice low. "She's tiny. These look heavy." Daniel crouched down, staring at them, his pulse roaring in his ears. The toes dug too deep, the arch was sunken unnaturally low, as though whatever had made them wasn't entirely human. Hannah shook her head furiously. No. No, she wouldn't leave like that. She was right here. Something took her. The word hung in the air. Something. For the first time, Ethan didn't have a joke, didn't have some smug remark to brush it off. His jaw tightened as he scanned the treeline, the beam of his flashlight darting back and forth. "We need to go after her." "Are you insane?" Daniel hissed. "It's the middle of the night. We can't just charge into the woods blind. We'll all get lost. And what, we just sit here?" Ethan shot back. "She's out there. She screamed for help, and you want to do nothing?" The two locked eyes, the fire between them hot with fear more than anger. Finally, Hannah broke the stalemate. "We can't leave her," she whispered. "Not like this." Daniel's mouth was dry, his instincts screaming at him to stay in the relative safety of the clearing. But another thought rose above the fear, the image of Maya's face earlier, pale and hollow-eyed, like she already knew this was coming. If it had been him out there, swallowed by the dark, would she have stayed behind? "Fine," he muttered, swallowing hard. "But we stick together. No splitting up. And the second it feels wrong, we come back. Got it?" They nodded, gripping their flashlights like lifelines as they followed the trail of prints into the trees. The forest seemed to shift as they left the clearing, the air colder, the silence heavier. Every step felt muffled, the crunch of leaves and snap of twigs swallowed almost instantly by the vast stillness. The deeper they went, the more Daniel felt it, an oppressive weight pressing down on him, as if the darkness itself had substance. His flashlight beam jittered across trunks and undergrowth, and every shadow looked too thick, too deliberate, as if something might be crouched within, waiting. The footprints led them deeper, winding along a faint game trail. Hannah clung to Daniel's sleeve, her flashlight beam shaking uncontrollably. Ethan forged ahead, jaw set, though Daniel noticed his knuckles white on the handle of his light. After what felt like an eternity, the trail ended abruptly in a small clearing. The footprints stopped in the middle of the space, pressed deep into the soil, and then nothing. No more prints leaving, no sign of struggle, no broken branches. Just gone. "She couldn't just vanish," Hannah whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel's skin crawled. He swept his flashlight slowly around the clearing, heart pounding harder with each pass. The beam caught on something, a strip of fabric snagged on a low branch. He moved closer and pulled it free. It was from Maya's jacket. "She was here," he said hoarsely. He stopped, because his light had caught something else. At the far edge of the clearing, half hidden between two trees, stood a figure. Tall. Thin. Unnaturally so, its arms too long, its body almost skeletal. Its face was pale, almost luminous against the dark, and its eyes were nothing but black, hollow sockets. Daniel's breath caught in his throat, his body locked in place. The flashlight beam shook in his hand, but he couldn't look away. He couldn't blink. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It simply stood there, watching. "Do you see that?" Ethan's voice cracked. Hannah whimpered, clutching Daniel's arm. The figure tilted its head, the motion slow, deliberate, as though curious. And then, without a sound, it took one step forward. The figure's movement was subtle, but it sent a cold spike of dread through Daniel's body. Just one step, that was all, but it felt like the whole clearing shifted with it, as if the forest itself recoiled. His flashlight beam wavered across its face, illuminating skin that looked stretched too tightly over bone, lips drawn thin and colorless. But the eyes, God, the eyes, were nothing but empty hollows, twin caverns that swallowed the light without reflection. They weren't eyes at all. They were voids. Hannah clamped onto his arm, trembling so hard he could feel it through his sleeve. "What is that?" she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Ethan didn't answer. His jaw was rigid, his flashlight locked on the thing as if breaking the beam would give it license to move faster. His usual sarcasm, his bravado, it was gone, stripped away. He was staring with the same raw, unblinking fear Daniel felt strangling his own chest. The hollow one, or whatever it was, tilted its head again, slowly, as though it were studying them. The motion was eerily deliberate, too human and not human at all. Then, without sound, it shifted forward another step. "Back up," Daniel hissed, though his throat was so tight the words barely came out. His legs felt numb, heavy, but somehow they moved, dragging Hannah with him. Ethan retreated too, his flashlight beam never leaving the figure. But the thing didn't lunge. Didn't attack. It simply followed, one step at a time, always at the same measured pace. The hollow pits of its eyes never left Daniel's face, as though it saw him and only him. "We have to run," Hannah choked out. "No," Daniel whispered, shaking his head frantically. His instincts screamed at him to sprint blindly through the woods, but something deeper, older, told him that running would only make it worse. Predators chase things that ran. And this thing, it wasn't chasing yet. It was feeding. Watching their fear swell with each step. They edged back until the clearing fell away behind them, their feet crunching softly on leaves. The thing didn't stop. It crossed the clearing without hurry, its movements disturbingly smooth, each step soundless despite the littered forest floor. "Daniel," Ethan whispered hoarsely, his voice cracking. "What the hell do we do?" He didn't have an answer. His brain screamed at him to think, to come up with anything, but all he could do was keep moving backward, flashlight beam trembling across that nightmare face. Then Hannah's foot caught on a root. She stumbled with a small cry, and in that split second the thing moved faster. Its head snapped toward her, body jerking forward in a blur of pale limbs. "Run!" Daniel shouted, his voice breaking. Hannah scrambled upright, and the three of them bolted. Branches whipped against their faces, the ground uneven beneath their feet. Their flashlights swung wildly, casting chaotic beams of light that made the trees blur into a dizzying rush of shadows. Behind them, Daniel swore he heard it, the dragging, deliberate steps, faster now, keeping pace. They tore through the woods until Daniel's lungs burned, until his legs screamed with effort. Only then did they burst back into their campsite, nearly collapsing in the sudden glow of their dying fire. They spun around together, flashlights trained on the darkness they'd come from. Nothing. The forest stood silent, black and endless, as though nothing had ever followed them at all. Hannah collapsed onto a log, sobbing, her whole body shaking. Ethan paced back and forth, running a hand through his hair, muttering curses under his breath. Daniel just stood there, his chest heaving, flashlight beam darting from tree to tree, waiting for that pale figure to step out again. But it didn't. What the hell was that? Hannah gasped finally, looking at Daniel as though he might have the answer. "Did you see its face? Its eyes? They weren't real." Daniel swallowed hard, his mouth dry as dust. I don't know what it was. But it saw us. It knew us." He hesitated. "It whispered my name last night." Both Hannah and Ethan froze, staring at him. "You're just telling us now?" Ethan's voice was sharp with disbelief. "I thought I imagined it." Daniel snapped, his voice shaking. "But it was real. It's been watching us." Ethan cursed again, kicking at the dirt. "We should have never come out here." Maya knew, she knew this place was wrong. And now she's gone. At her name, silence fell heavy. Hannah's sobs quieted, her face pale in the firelight. None of them wanted to say it, but the truth pressed down on them all the same. Whatever had taken Maya was still out there. Daniel forced himself to move, grabbing more wood and feeding the fire until the flames leapt higher again, casting the clearing in fierce, flickering light. The shadows pulled back, but only barely. "We're not letting that thing come close again," he said, trying to sound steady. "We stay in the firelight. All night. No tents. No splitting up. We wait until morning, and then we get out of these woods." They nodded, huddling close to the blaze. Hours dragged on, the fire popping and hissing as the three of them stared into the trees, daring anything to step out. The night grew colder, the darkness thicker, until exhaustion began to blur the edges of their fear. It was Hannah who noticed first. She jolted upright, her voice trembling. "The fire's not keeping it back." Daniel frowned, glancing at her. "What are you talking about?" She pointed with a shaking hand. "Look." He followed her gaze, and his blood ran cold. At the far edge of the firelight, just beyond where the flames could reach, the hollow one stood. Perfectly still. Perfectly silent. Its empty eyes fixed on them. And then, slowly, it stepped closer, the firelight washing over its face as if the flames meant nothing at all. The firelight, once their fragile shield, did nothing to stop the hollow one as it drifted forward. Daniel felt his stomach lurch as the figure crossed that invisible boundary, pale limbs bathed in orange glow. The flames licked upward as though straining higher, trying to push it back, but the creature didn't falter. Its hollow eyes reflected nothing, no light, no spark, just bottomless void. It moved with deliberate slowness, as if savoring their terror, the way a predator toys with prey before it feeds. Hannah whimpered, clutching Daniel's arms so tightly her nails dug into his skin. Ethan swore under his breath, backing toward the other side of the clearing, but no matter where they shifted, the hollow one's gaze remained fixed. Not on Ethan. Not on Hannah. On Daniel. Those eyeless pits pinned him in place like a moth nailed to a board, stripping away every shred of rational thought. "Daniel," Ethan hissed. "Say something. What the hell do we do?" Daniel's throat tightened. Words caught there, useless and small. All he could think was that it shouldn't be possible, nothing should be able to cross fire like that. It went against every story, every instinct. Fire was safety. Fire was life. And yet this thing walked through it like it was smoke. It stopped just inside the clearing, not 5 yards away. The firelight revealed too much now, the pallid skin stretched so taut it seemed moments from splitting, the impossibly long fingers dangling just above the ground, the faint tremor in its chest as if it were breathing, but no sound came. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath with it. Then, in a voice that wasn't a voice at all, Daniel heard it. Daniel. His name, rasping through his skull like a wind curling through a hollow log. Not spoken aloud, not in the air, but inside him. The sound was empty, echoing, as if spoken from some vast cavern deep beneath the earth. Daniel staggered back, his flashlight slipping from his grip and tumbling into the dirt. The beam rolled across the clearing, swinging wildly until it landed on the hollow one's face. For the briefest moment, Daniel swore he saw something inside those hollow sockets, a flicker, a movement, as if something writhed in the void. "Stop it," he shouted, though his voice cracked with fear. "Get out of my head." Hannah screamed at the outburst, burying her face against his arm, while Ethan swung his flashlight like a weapon, as if sheer force could hold the thing back. But the hollow one didn't retreat. It tilted its head, empty eyes boring into Daniel, as though peeling away his thoughts, his memories, his very self. Daniel's knees buckled. His heart thundered, not with the rhythm of panic, but with the crushing weight of something pressing down on him, draining him. He felt his own fear being tugged from his chest, stretched thin like threads of smoke. The more he trembled, the stronger the thing seemed to become, its presence thickening in the clearing, suffocating. Ethan noticed. "It's feeding," he shouted, voice cracking. "It's feeding on you, Dan." The words jolted Daniel like a shock, snapping him back enough to wrench his gaze away. He stumbled to the side, clutching Hannah, dragging her with him. His chest heaved as though he'd been drowning. The Hollow One did not pursue immediately. Instead, it lingered in the firelight, its head cocking slightly, like a spider disturbed from its web but not yet threatened enough to retreat. And then, slowly, it sank down, folding its impossibly long legs until it crouched at the edge of the flames. It was waiting. Daniel's mind reeled with the realization. The Hollow One wasn't hunting them in the way animals hunted. It didn't need to. It had all the time in the world. It could sit there, empty and patient, drawing out their terror until they broke apart from the inside. The night dragged on in a nightmare haze. None of them dared sleep, though exhaustion pulled at their bones. Every time Daniel's eyelids sagged, he jolted awake to see those hollows fixed on him, unblinking. When Hannah cried silently into her knees, the thing's chest seemed to pulse faintly, as though inhaling her fear. When Ethan cursed and threw sticks at it in desperate anger, the Hollow One didn't move. The projectiles passed through its form with the strange, eerie resistance of smoke, only to scatter embers across the dirt. And still it waited. By the time the first pale light of dawn crept into the trees, Daniel's nerves were frayed raw. His mind buzzed with static, his mouth dry as sand. Hannah had slumped against him, trembling in half-conscious exhaustion, while Ethan paced like a caged animal, muttering to himself. The Hollow One remained crouched, motionless, as the gray light washed over the clearing. And then, as if it had never been there, it was simply gone. One blink, it sat watching. The next, it dissolved into the morning mist, the firelight flickering weakly over nothing but empty air. None of them moved at first. The silence was unbearable, oppressive. Then Ethan barked a ragged laugh, though his eyes were wide with panic. "It's gone. Jesus Christ, it's gone." Morning scared it off. Daniel wasn't so sure. His gut told him it hadn't left, it had only slipped back into the trees, biding its time. He rose stiffly, helping Hannah to her feet. "We're leaving. Now. Pack up, whatever's left. We're getting out of these woods." They stumbled into a frenzy of movement, shoving sleeping bags and supplies haphazardly into packs, leaving half their gear behind. No one cared anymore about order or weight, all that mattered was putting distance between themselves and that clearing. The forest felt thicker than before, shadows clinging even under daylight. Every snapped twig behind them made Hannah flinch. Every gust of wind made Ethan whip around with wild eyes. Hours passed, and still the trail refused to appear. Daniel knew they should have found it by now. They weren't amateurs, he remembered every twist, every landmark. But the woods didn't look right anymore. Trees that should have been familiar leaned at strange angles, their bark etched with patterns he didn't recall seeing before. The light filtered down in broken shards that made everything shimmer with unreality. "We're lost," Hannah whispered, her voice hollow with despair. "No," Daniel said sharply, though the conviction in his tone was gone. "We'll find it. We just—" He froze. Up ahead, half hidden among the trees, stood a figure. Pale. Tall. Watching. It hadn't gone anywhere at all. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The forest itself seemed to lean inward, suffocating the clearing with silence. Daniel's breath caught in his chest as he stared at the figure ahead, tall, thin, its pallid skin blending with the pale shafts of light filtering through the trees. It didn't move. It didn't need to. Its hollow eyes, black, cavernous voids, were fixed on him, and that was enough to freeze the blood in his veins. Ethan raised his flashlight, though it was useless in daylight, his hand trembling so violently that the beam jittered across the trunks. It's the same one," he stammered. "It's the same one. It's been ahead of us the whole time." "That's not possible," Daniel whispered, but his voice sounded weak even to his own ears. His brain fought for logic, for reason, but each passing second stripped those defenses thinner. We've been walking for hours. It can't just—" "Yes it can," Hannah interrupted, her tone flat with despair. She clutched Daniel's sleeve like a lifeline, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Don't you get it? It's not following us. It's leading us. We're walking where it wants us to walk." The words cut deep. Daniel had thought he was guiding them, retracing their path to safety. But now, as he scanned the trees, his certainty collapsed. None of this looked familiar. The moss grew in strange spirals, curling up trunks in unnatural patterns. The canopy swayed in a wind he couldn't feel on his skin. Even the air smelled different, damp and metallic, like rust and soil left too long in the dark. "We're not in the same woods anymore," Hannah whispered. Ethan let out a bitter laugh that cracked midway. "Then where the hell are we?" "Huh? Where the hell has it taken us?" No one answered. The hollow one tilted its head, a slow, deliberate motion that made the world around them seem to tilt with it. Then, with that same agonizing slowness, it lifted one long arm and pointed deeper into the forest. Daniel's stomach turned. "No," he said sharply, shaking his head. "No, we're not following you. We're not." His words strangled off as the figure shifted. It didn't walk, didn't stride. It simply was, one moment rooted ahead of them, the next farther into the trees. The movement was seamless, unnatural, like skipping frames in a broken film reel. Each time Daniel blinked, it was deeper, always just far enough to force them to move if they wanted to keep it in sight. Ethan's breathing grew ragged. "It's hurting us." Hannah clutched Daniel tighter. "We can't follow. We can't." Daniel swallowed hard, his chest burning. Every instinct screamed that she was right. But when he looked back the way they'd come, his heart sank. The path had dissolved. Trees pressed in thick and knotted, branches overlapping like tangled ribs. There was no trail anymore, no sign of where they had walked. "We don't have a choice," he whispered. They followed. The hours that came after blurred together in a nightmare haze. The sun hung suspended in a pale, colorless sky, refusing to move higher or lower. Shadows stretched at impossible angles, sometimes doubling, sometimes vanishing entirely. The hollow one never rushed, never faltered, it simply appeared ahead, always waiting, always watching, forcing them onward. Hannah stumbled often, her legs giving out, her sobs growing quieter as exhaustion hollowed her out. Ethan muttered to himself constantly now, broken sentences under his breath, sometimes curses, sometimes prayers. Daniel tried to keep his focus sharp, tried to count steps, to measure direction, but every landmark unraveled the longer he looked. A tree with a scarred trunk would vanish when he turned his head. A rock formation seemed to breathe when touched by shadow. At some point, Daniel realized they weren't hearing the normal forest anymore. No birdsong. No rustling underbrush. Not even the whisper of wind through leaves. The silence pressed on his skull, making his own breathing sound too loud, too ragged. Then, without warning, they entered a clearing. It was wide, unnaturally round, the ground covered in brittle grass that crunched beneath their boots. At the center stood something that froze Daniel in place. A fire pit. Surrounded by logs arranged like benches. Surrounded by torn tents, shredded sleeping bags, rusted lanterns. Dozens of them. "Oh my God," Hannah whimpered, clutching Daniel's arm with both hands. These are campsites. Not one. Not two. Dozens. The remains of old camps layered over each other, as though every group who had ever entered this place had been funneled here. Daniel's flashlight beam swept across collapsed nylon and scattered belongings, some sun-bleached, others half-swallowed by moss. He caught glimpses of backpacks torn open, shoes with their laces frayed apart, a plastic water bottle cracked and brittle with age. Ethan let out a strangled laugh that broke into a sob. "We're not the first. We're not the first and we won't be the last." He dropped to his knees, clawing at the dirt with frantic hands. "It's been doing this forever. Forever." Daniel's stomach churned. His eyes caught on a half-collapsed tent, fabric shredded down the middle. Inside, lying against the dirt, was a shoe. Still on a foot. Still attached to a withered ankle bone. He tore his gaze away, bile rising in his throat. Hannah buried her face in his chest, trembling violently. And then he heard it again. Daniel. The Hollow One stood at the far end of the clearing, just beyond the collapsed camps. Its body was still, but the void of its eyes seemed wider now, darker, pulling at him. Its voice echoed inside his skull, deeper, more insistent. You belong here. Daniel staggered, clutching his head as the words reverberated through him. His vision swam, the clearing tilting as though the ground itself shifted. He could feel something probing his thoughts, rooting through his memories, dragging his fear into the open. He saw Maya's face flash across his mind, her laughter, her scream, the moment she vanished, and the Hollow One's presence swelled with it, feeding. No, he shouted, but the word felt thin, useless. He dropped to his knees, hands pressed to his temples. His own fear was betraying him, bleeding out into the creature's grasp. Hannah screamed, clutching him tighter, but her voice sounded distant, muffled, like she was behind glass. Ethan's shouting blended with hers, ragged and panicked. Daniel's vision darkened at the edges as the Hollow One's void eyes filled his mind entirely, dragging him into an endless, hollow dark. And in that moment, Daniel realized something chilling. The Hollow One didn't just feed on fear. It hollowed you out until you became like it. Daniel could feel it inside him. Not physically, there were no claws tearing flesh, no hands wrapping around his throat, but something colder, something worse. It sifted through him like fingers combing through pages of a book, peeling away layers of his thoughts, stripping the rawest parts of his fear and feeding on them. Each memory it touched dulled, hollowed. The image of Maya's smile, once sharp and alive, felt brittle now, like a photograph left too long in the sun. He tried to hold on to it, to clutch it against his chest, but the harder he gripped, the more it bled away. Hannah's sobs cut through the fog, sharp and desperate. She was still clinging to him, shaking violently, her nails digging into his arm. Her fear was so raw it bled into him, but instead of comforting, it only fed the Hollow One more. Daniel could feel it growing stronger, heavier, every tremor in her voice swelling its presence. Ethan's voice, louder, angrier, shouted curses at the creature, but each word landed hollow, useless in the vast silence of the clearing. Then, as suddenly as it had pressed inside him, the Hollow One pulled back. Daniel gasped as though breaching water after drowning, his lungs burning, his head pounding. His vision sharpened enough to see the creature still standing at the edge of the clearing, motionless, its eyeless hollows locked onto him. But now he understood. It hadn't pulled back out of mercy. It had retreated because it didn't need to stay inside him. The seed had already been planted. Ethan grabbed Daniel's shoulder, shaking him hard. Stay with us, man. Stay with us. Don't let that thing in. His eyes were wild, desperate, as though he could physically anchor Daniel back into himself through sheer force. I'm fine, Daniel lied, his voice trembling. But he wasn't. Every time he blinked, he saw those hollows behind his eyelids, stretching wider, pulling him closer. They stumbled away from the clearing, too terrified to linger near the collapsed camps and the brittle remains of others who had never left. The forest closed in tighter, the trees leaning so close that their branches scraped together overhead like skeletal hands. No matter which direction they turned, Daniel felt the Hollow One's gaze, a weight pressing against the back of his skull. He knew, without question, that it could appear ahead of them again at any moment. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, maybe days. Time no longer felt linear. The sun refused to shift in the sky, always pale and distant, casting the woods in an endless twilight. Ethan raged at it, shouting at the sky, throwing rocks and sticks in every direction until his arms gave out. Hannah whispered prayers under her breath, half coherent, her voice trembling with every word. Daniel just kept walking, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant letting the Hollow One seep deeper. At last they came upon a creek, the water sluggish and black. Relief surged for a fleeting second, water meant direction, meant survival, but as Daniel crouched beside it, his reflection rippled back at him. His stomach twisted. His eyes were wrong. Not fully, not yet. But the reflection showed the faintest shadow in his irises, a dark ring bleeding inward, as though his pupils were swallowing more than just light. He splashed the water, distorting the image, heart hammering. When the surface cleared, his reflection was normal again. But the echo of what he'd seen lingered, gnawing at his mind. He didn't tell the others. Instead, they followed the creek, desperate for escape, but the water wound endlessly through the forest, looping back on itself in impossible curves. They crossed the same crooked log 3 times, though Daniel swore they hadn't turned back. At one point, Ethan hurled a branch into the current, only for it to float past them again an hour later, as if the creek itself were circling them. Exhaustion wore them down until every step felt like dragging stone. Hannah stumbled more often, her face pale, lips cracked. Ethan grew manic, alternating between laughter and fury, muttering to himself in jagged fragments. Daniel barely spoke at all. He couldn't trust his voice, he wasn't sure it still belonged entirely to him. Then, as twilight deepened into a deeper gray, they saw it. Smoke. Thin, pale tendrils rising between the trees. For a moment, all 3 froze, staring. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant people. Survivors. Ethan broke first, sprinting toward it, shouting hoarsely. Hannah followed, stumbling and breathless. Daniel hesitated, his stomach tight with dread. Something about the smoke felt wrong, too thin, too gray, too familiar. But hope was a cruel master, and it dragged him forward despite his gut screaming otherwise. They burst into another clearing, and Daniel's heart sank like a stone. It was their fire. The one they'd left behind that morning. Still smoldering. Still ringed with stones and surrounded by the scraps of their abandoned gear. The same logs arranged haphazardly, the same footprints stamped into the dirt. Hannah let out a strangled sob and collapsed to her knees. Ethan kicked at the dirt, screaming, his voice raw. "We've been walking all goddamn day, and we're back here? We didn't move at all." Daniel's legs trembled. He knew better. They had moved. Miles. Hours. Days. The forest itself had folded them back to the beginning, circling them like rats in a maze. And standing just beyond the smoke, half shadowed by the trees, was the Hollow One. Watching. Waiting. Daniel's chest constricted. His vision blurred at the edges, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. And for the briefest, most terrifying moment, he wanted to walk to it. Not out of fear, but out of something else. A pull. A gravity. Because deep down, some small part of him whispered that the Hollow One wasn't outside anymore. It was already inside him. Daniel sat at the edge of their smoldering fire pit, staring at the thin smoke curling upward and dissolving into the gray sky. His chest rose and fell too quickly, breath shallow, as if his lungs were struggling to decide if they still belonged to him. The realization that the forest had folded them back to their own campsite hollowed him out in a way the Hollow One never could. This wasn't just being lost, this was being kept. Hannah rocked back and forth beside him, her hands clutched together, whispering fragments of prayers. Her lips moved soundlessly at times, her gaze darting into the trees as though she feared if she stopped praying, even for a second, the Hollow One would come closer. Ethan paced the perimeter like a feral animal, kicking through ashes and discarded gear, muttering curses and wild plans of escape that fell apart even as he said them. His eyes darted constantly to the treeline, never still. Daniel, though, barely moved. He didn't need to. He could feel it. The Hollow One wasn't standing in the trees now. It didn't need to. Its presence was pressed against his skull, whispering at the edges of his thoughts. Every now and then he swore he heard his name again, Daniel, not loud, not invasive, but soft, coaxing. And worse than hearing it was the way he wanted to answer. He rubbed his eyes with shaking hands, but the darkness didn't vanish. Even in the brightness of day, when he blinked, the world dimmed just a fraction too long. His vision would cloud, and for a second he'd see what looked like the clearing through the Hollow One's hollow eyes, distorted, cavernous, everything stretched and brittle. He blinked hard each time until the world returned to normal, but the moments were growing longer. "Dan," Ethan snapped suddenly, his voice raw. "You're too quiet. What's going on with you?" Daniel lifted his head slowly. Ethan was staring at him, sweat dripping down his face, his hands shaking as he pointed an accusing finger. "It's in you, isn't it? I saw you when it had you in the clearing. I saw it. You're letting it inside." "That's not true," Daniel muttered, though even as he said it, the words tasted like ash. "It is," Ethan spat. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched tight. "You're different. You keep staring off, like you're somewhere else. It's using you. It's trying to make you like it." Hannah whimpered and looked at Daniel with wide, terrified eyes. "Please tell me that's not true." Daniel swallowed hard. He wanted to reassure her, to snap at Ethan, to prove he was still himself, but when he opened his mouth, a rasping whisper escaped instead. "We belong here." The words weren't his. They slithered out, soft and hollow, vibrating through his chest like a second voice underneath his own. His blood ran cold. Hannah recoiled instantly, her hands flying to her mouth, and Ethan's face twisted in horror. "You heard that?" Ethan shouted, backing away. "You heard that, Hannah? He's gone, he's turning into it." "No!" Daniel shouted, clutching his head, his voice breaking with desperation. "That wasn't me, it's God, it's in me, but I'm fighting it. I'm still here." He pressed his palms to his temples so hard it felt like his skull would crack, trying to smother the echo inside him. "I'm still here." Ethan didn't believe him. Daniel saw it in his eyes, the distrust, the fear. He was already calculating whether to leave Daniel behind if it meant saving himself. Hannah, torn between them, looked like she might shatter at any moment. The forest chose that moment to deepen. The sky above dimmed without warning, as though the pale sun had been swallowed whole. Shadows lengthened unnaturally fast, the air growing heavy, damp. The trees leaned closer together, branches groaning as if drawn by invisible strings. A sound began, a faint creak, like wood bending under pressure, and then a low, hollow moan rolled through the clearing, vibrating in their bones. Hannah screamed, clutching her ears. Ethan staggered back toward the fire pit. Daniel froze, every nerve in his body alight. The sound wasn't coming from the trees. It was coming from inside the earth itself. And then they saw them. Figures. Dozens of them, maybe more, flickering between the trees. Not alive, not solid. Their bodies were faint as smoke, their outlines trembling in the dim light. But their faces, Daniel's breath caught. They were hollow-eyed. Each and every one. Some were young. Some were old. Some still bore tattered clothing that might have once been camping gear. All of them had empty sockets where eyes should have been. And all of them turned their heads in unison, their hollow gazes locking onto the three huddled by the smoldering fire. Hannah shrieked and collapsed against Daniel, sobbing uncontrollably. Ethan cursed and stumbled back, his face pale, his bravado stripped bare. Daniel, though, couldn't look away. His heart pounded, but beneath the terror was a horrifying recognition. He knew these faces. The campers from the collapsed tents. The ones who'd come before. The hollow one wasn't alone. It never had been. The figures began to drift closer, silent but unstoppable, their hollow eyes fixed, their forms bending the air around them. And for the briefest, most gut-wrenching second, Daniel saw his own reflection among them, pale, hollow-eyed, drifting forward with the rest. He stumbled back with a hoarse cry, clutching his chest, fighting to breathe. But the hollow one's voice filled his skull again, louder this time, deeper. "Join us." And in his bones, Daniel knew, it wasn't asking. It was promising. The air grew colder as the hollow-eyed figures glided closer, their movements unhurried but unstoppable, as though distance itself bent to them. Each step Daniel, Hannah, and Ethan took backward only seemed to stretch the clearing into something infinite. No matter how far they tried to retreat, the figures covered ground effortlessly, narrowing the space, shrinking the circle of safety around the three. Hannah clung to Daniel's arm, her sobs now strangled, as though even crying too loud might draw them faster. Ethan stumbled near the fire pit, snatching up a half-burnt branch, swinging it wildly in the air like it might fend off the impossible. His voice was a ragged scream, "Stay back. I swear to God, stay the hell back." The ghosts didn't slow. Their hollow eyes stared through him, unblinking. Daniel's body shook, but not from cold. Every figure that drifted closer seemed to pull something out of him, his warmth, his will, his very sense of self. He saw flickers of their last moments, glimpses pouring into his mind without his permission. A woman clawing at her own tent walls before being dragged into the woods. A man kneeling in the dirt, whispering apologies as the darkness swallowed him. A teenager, no older than 16, staring into the trees until the light left her eyes. Their stories filled him, each one hollowing him a little more. "Daniel," Hannah whispered, her grip trembling against his arm. "Tell me you're still here. Please, please say you're still here." Her desperation broke him. He wanted to scream reassurance, to pull her close and swear that he hadn't given up. But the truth tasted bitter on his tongue. He wasn't sure. The Hollow One's presence inside him pulsed harder now, steady as a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Every breath he took echoed with its whisper, "Stop resisting. Stop resisting." Then, without warning, one of the hollow-eyed figures broke from the group and drifted forward, closer than the rest. Its body shimmered, flickering between transparency and something more solid. It was a young man, tall, broad-shouldered, with strands of dark hair matted against his pale face. Daniel's breath hitched. He recognized him. It was the hiker from the Rangers' missing posters. The one whose family had left flowers at the trailhead in hope he'd be found. The young man's hollow gaze fixed on Daniel, his lips parting in a soundless whisper. No words came out, but Daniel didn't need sound. The message thundered straight into his skull. "You're already one of us." Daniel staggered back violently, clutching his ears, as if he could block the voice by force. "No! I'm not you," he shouted, but his voice cracked, weak even to his own ears. Hannah's sobs grew harsher, her fingernails digging into his arm like she could anchor him in reality. Ethan, meanwhile, was unraveling. "They've got him," Ethan snarled, his eyes wild, spit flying from his lips. "He's gone, Hannah. Look at him, he's one of them already. We have to go, we have to," his words cut off as he turned toward the forest. The treeline had closed in. What was once a wide gap of trees now seemed suffocatingly close, trunks leaning inward, branches knotted like claws. The hollow-eyed figures drifted between them, filling every path, every escape. Ethan's frantic scream tore from his throat as he swung the burning branch again, but the figures weren't deterred. They didn't even flinch. Hannah finally snapped, her voice breaking in terror. "What do you want from us?" she screamed at the figures, her face streaked with tears, her voice echoing into the endless woods. "Why us? Why won't you let us go?" For the first time, the figures stopped moving. The silence that followed was heavier than sound, pressing against their ears, crushing the space in their lungs. The hollow-eyed man, the one Daniel recognized, turned his head slightly, as though the question mattered, as though the answer hung just outside reach. Then, slowly, he raised one trembling, transparent hand and pointed. At Daniel. Hannah gasped, staggering back. Ethan froze, his face twisting with disgust and horror. "It's him," Ethan growled, his voice hoarse. "It's always been him. They don't want us. They want him." Daniel shook his head violently, tears stinging his eyes. "No, that's not true." But even as he denied it, the Hollow One's voice purred inside him, stronger now than ever. "Chosen." The word rattled through him, deeper than bone. And in that instant, Daniel understood with sick clarity, this wasn't random. The forest hadn't trapped them at the campsite by mistake. The Hollow One hadn't whispered his name at random. He wasn't just prey. He was the replacement. The figures began to close in again, but now their hollow eyes weren't on Ethan or Hannah. They were all fixed on Daniel, as though waiting for him to finally accept what they already knew. Hannah's voice cracked, desperate. "Daniel, fight it. Please, you don't have to do this." Don't let them take you. But Ethan took a different stance. He backed away, brandishing the burning branch like a weapon. His voice trembled with fury and fear. If he's what they want, we should give him to them. It's him or us, Hannah. You know it's true. Daniel's chest constricted. The words cut deep, not because Ethan was cruel, but because Daniel felt the seed of truth in them. The Hollow One wasn't going to stop. It would hollow him out until nothing remained. If he gave in, if he became one of them, maybe Hannah could escape. Maybe at least one of them could. But then, deeper, darker, the voice coiled through him again. Not one. All. Daniel's stomach dropped. The promise wasn't salvation. It wasn't bargaining. Even if he gave in, even if he surrendered to the Hollow One's will, the forest would never release Hannah or Ethan. It would take them too. It would take everyone. The figures were nearly upon them now, their forms close enough to stir the smoke of the fire. Hannah screamed and grabbed Daniel's face, forcing his hollowing gaze to meet hers. Stay with me, Daniel. Don't listen to it. Please, don't leave me alone. And for one final moment, Daniel felt like he had a choice. Daniel could feel Hannah's hands on his cheeks, warm, trembling, human. They were the last anchor he had left, the final proof that he hadn't been swallowed whole yet. Her desperate eyes bore into his, searching for some flicker of recognition, some hint that he was still himself and not just a vessel for the thing that had haunted these woods for centuries. For a moment, he thought he could hold on to that warmth. But then the Hollow One's voice hissed through him again, steady as a second heartbeat. All will hollow. All will come. The circle of ghostly figures tightened. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly now, as though something inside them pulsed with anticipation. Each step they drifted closer made the air heavier, as if oxygen itself was being drained from the clearing. Hannah's sobs turned to shallow gasps. Ethan's curses faltered into strangled sounds of terror. Daniel felt his own chest heave, his lungs struggling against a suffocating weight that wasn't air, it was the presence, the demand, the inevitability of what was coming. And then Ethan snapped. His eyes flashed with a primal desperation Daniel had never seen before. Without warning, he lunged forward, grabbing Hannah's wrist and tearing her away from Daniel. We don't have time for this, he shouted, his voice wild, cracked. He's gone, Hannah. Don't you see it? He's already theirs. If we want to live, we leave him here. He's the one they want, so let them take him. Hannah screamed, twisting against Ethan's grip, clawing at his arm. No. No, we can't leave him. He's not gone. Daniel, say something, please. Daniel staggered back, his mind a storm of noise. The Hollow One's whispers filled him with promises, threats, inevitabilities. Ethan's furious voice cut through like knives. Hannah's desperate pleas tugged at what little of himself he still clung to. His body trembled violently, his legs nearly giving out. For one unbearable second, he considered it, letting them leave him. Letting himself become what the Hollow One demanded. If it saved Hannah, maybe that was the only way. But then the Hollow One's whisper turned into a roar. No escape. No choice. All. The words crashed inside his skull like thunder. His knees buckled, and he dropped to the dirt, clutching his head with both hands, screaming. Images flooded his mind in flashes, disjointed but searing, Hannah hollow-eyed, her body drifting among the dead. Ethan clawing at the earth as shadows dragged him under. The entire forest filled with nothing but those hollow gazes, stretching endlessly, swallowing every living thing. Daniel's scream broke into sobs. It's lying, he gasped between choked breaths. Even if I go, it'll take you too. It'll take everyone. Hannah froze, her tears shining in the firelight. Ethan, panting, still holding the branch like a weapon, shook his head violently. No, you don't know that. It's you, Daniel, it's always been you. His voice cracked, and for the first time, Daniel saw that Ethan wasn't just angry, he was terrified. Terrified enough to sacrifice anyone to survive one more hour. The hollow-eyed figures were almost upon them now. Their edges blurred as they pressed closer, their shapes bending the air around them like heat haze. The fire sputtered violently, flames snapping as though suffocating in their presence. Hannah dropped to her knees beside Daniel, clutching him tight, sobbing into his shoulder. "I don't care. I don't care what it takes, just don't leave me here alone." Daniel's body convulsed as the Hollow One's presence surged. For a moment, his vision wasn't his own, it was black, endless, cavernous. Through those hollow eyes, he saw Hannah clinging to him not as a girl begging for her friend but as prey clinging to the last illusion of safety. He saw Ethan not as a desperate man but as a flicker of meat and bone waiting to be stripped away. And he saw himself, already fading, already hollow. The voice was inside him now, not just whispering but commanding. "Take them. Hollow them. Join." Daniel's hands trembled violently. He felt his body twitch forward as though pulled by strings. His chest burned. His throat strained. He fought to resist, but the pull was relentless, intoxicating. For the briefest instant, he could feel what it would be like to give in, the release of all fear, all doubt, all pain. To become nothing but emptiness, a vessel. Hannah's voice cut through the storm. "Daniel, please. You're stronger than this. Don't let it win." Her words struck something deep, something buried beneath all the Hollow One's poison. He remembered the way Hannah had laughed earlier that night, sitting by the fire. The way Ethan had stubbornly tried to lead them even when he was scared. The way the three of them had started this trip believing they were invincible, unstoppable. That fragile, human foolishness, it was theirs. And the Hollow One wanted to erase it. Daniel's scream tore through the clearing. He clutched Hannah tighter, anchoring himself to her warmth, her reality. "I won't," he shouted, his voice breaking. "I won't give you up. You hear me? You can't have them." The figures shuddered violently, their hollow eyes flashing brighter. A low groan rolled through the clearing, deeper than thunder, shaking the earth itself. The Hollow One's fury coursed through Daniel, trying to drown him in blackness. But he dug in his heels, gripping Hannah like a lifeline. Ethan stood frozen, staring wide-eyed, his branch still burning faintly. For the first time, Daniel saw something new in his face, not anger, not even fear, but the dawning realization that maybe Daniel wasn't gone yet. But then the ground beneath them cracked. The fire pit split open with a violent hiss, flames shooting upward in a column of sparks. The soil shook, roots snapping like bones, as though the forest itself was splitting apart to drag them under. The hollow-eyed figures surged forward, their shapes breaking and reforming like shadows caught in a storm. Daniel's body was dragged to his knees, his fingers clawing at the dirt as he screamed against the pull. Hannah clung to him, refusing to let go even as the ground shook beneath her. Ethan, staggering backward, shouted in panic. "It's opening! It's taking the whole damn clearing with it." The Hollow One's voice roared now, booming inside Daniel's skull until it rattled his teeth. "Now! Hollow! All!" Daniel lifted his head, his eyes burning, his body trembling at the edge of breaking. He knew this was the moment, the choice, the impossible decision. Either he surrendered to the Hollow One's promise of oblivion, or he found some way, any way, to fight it back. But how do you fight something that wasn't flesh or blood, but emptiness itself? The ground beneath them split wider, a yawning black void opening in the center of the clearing. And from its depths, something vast and formless began to rise. The ground split with a groan that seemed to echo from miles beneath the earth, as though the entire Appalachian range was hollow inside, and now that emptiness was crawling upward to meet them. Soil and stone crumbled into the fissure, roots snapped like brittle twigs, and the campfire was swallowed in a hiss of sparks. The clearing became a chasm, its center a widening mouth that breathed a cold wind up from below. Hannah screamed and clung to Daniel, her nails digging into his arms, while Ethan stumbled backward until his heel struck the edge of the widening crack. And then they saw it. From the void below, something began to rise. At first it looked like smoke, black, swirling, shifting, but the longer they stared, the more it seemed to take shape. Not a body, not anything human, but a suggestion of form, a head that was only a hollow curve, shoulders sloping into nothing, arms that stretched into tendrils of darkness that reached across the ground. It was massive, dwarfing the trees, yet at the same time its edges bled into shadow, like it was too big to fully exist in their world. The Hollow One. Its presence wasn't just in their ears now, it pressed into their skin, their bones, their thoughts. Daniel felt his heartbeat falter, stutter, as if it no longer belonged to him. Hannah whimpered against his shoulder, her body shaking violently. Ethan fell to his knees, clutching his head, screaming incoherently. And then the figures, the hollow-eyed phantoms that had surrounded them, knelt. One by one, they bowed toward the rising shadow, their hollow sockets glowing faintly. The devotion in their gestures was unmistakable. They weren't just victims. They were disciples. Daniel's chest constricted as the truth struck him like a blade. This thing wasn't simply feeding. It was worshipped by those it had taken. And it wanted him not just as prey, but as its heir. The Hollow One's voice thundered through the clearing, deeper now, amplified by the cavernous thing rising from the void. Chosen. Take your place. Daniel staggered forward against his will, his feet dragging through the dirt as though pulled by unseen chains. Hannah screamed, throwing her arms around his waist, digging her heels into the ground to anchor him. No! You can't have him, she sobbed, her voice cracking. But the pull was relentless. Every muscle in his body trembled with the effort to resist, yet step by step, he was dragged closer to the chasm. Ethan's voice cut through, raw with terror. Daniel, don't fight it, he shouted, his words wild. If it wants you, give it what it wants. End this before it takes us all. His face was pale, twisted, the firelight gone from his eyes. He had given up on resisting. Daniel's vision blurred. Shadows crept into the edges of his sight until Hannah's tear-streaked face was the only thing he could still see clearly. Her voice trembled as she clung tighter. You're stronger than this. You're not like them. You're not hollow. You're still Daniel. For a fleeting second, he remembered her laughter by the river on their first day, the warmth of sunlight on their skin, the smell of pine and earth before everything had gone wrong. He remembered Ethan teasing her, remembered the way they'd all believed this was just another trip, just another adventure. Those memories felt fragile now, thin as spiderwebs. But they were his. The Hollow One couldn't take that from him unless he let it. His throat tore as he screamed against the roar of the shadow. I am not yours. The Hollow One's form shuddered, its hollow head tilting slightly, as though studying him. The phantoms hissed in unison, a chorus of empty breath, their hollow eyes glowing brighter. The ground cracked wider, the void yawning, and from its depths a hand, or something like one, rose, vast and skeletal, formed of shadow and ash. It reached toward Daniel, each finger longer than a man's body, curling to seize him. The pull grew unbearable. His body strained forward, joints burning, muscles tearing as though his very flesh wanted to leap into the Hollow One's grasp. Hannah sobbed, screaming his name, holding him tighter. Ethan stumbled backward, eyes wide, staring at the hand that threatened to swallow them all. We're dead. We're all dead, he whispered, his voice breaking. Daniel dug his feet into the trembling earth. His skin burned, his bones ached, but he clung to one thought: if he gave in, they were all lost. Hannah, Ethan, anyone who ever stepped foot into these woods again, they would all become hollow. But if he could resist, if he could fight, maybe, just maybe, there was a chance. The Hollow One's voice slammed into him again, so loud it drowned out the world. You are mine. Daniel's scream ripped through the clearing. He felt something tear inside, not just in his body, but in his soul. He pulled against the invisible chains, dragging himself backward an inch at a time, every step like wading through fire. Hannah screamed encouragement through her sobs, gripping him with all her strength. Ethan, trembling, dropped the branch he had carried and fell to the ground, covering his ears as though he couldn't bear to hear. The hand of shadow reached lower, its vast fingers spreading wide, curling to scoop them into the void. Daniel's legs buckled, his body nearly giving out. The voice surged louder, demanding, commanding. And then, in one last desperate act, Daniel tore Hannah from his waist and shoved her violently toward Ethan. She screamed as she hit the ground, but Daniel didn't stop. He turned back toward the hollow one, every nerve screaming in agony, and staggered forward into its grasp. "Take me," he roared, his voice breaking, blood running from his nose. "If you want me so badly, then take me. But leave them alone." The hollow one froze. The phantoms lifted their heads. For a heartbeat, the entire clearing was silent, as though the forest itself had stopped breathing. And then the hollow one moved. The vast hand surged forward, engulfing Daniel in a rush of shadow and cold. Hannah's scream split the night. Ethan's voice broke in terror. The hollow-eyed phantoms let out a sound between a sigh and a wail. And Daniel was gone. The world vanished the instant the hollow one's hand closed around Daniel. He didn't feel flesh or bone against him, he felt nothingness, as if the shadows themselves had swallowed his body whole. Cold surged through his veins, but not the kind that froze skin. It was deeper, reaching inside his marrow, inside his thoughts. He gasped, but the air that entered him wasn't air at all, it was silence, thick and absolute, pressing down until his heartbeat faltered. For a moment, he thought he had died. But then his eyes opened, or something like eyes, and he realized he was standing. Not in the clearing. Not anywhere familiar. The world around him was vast, black, endless, like the inside of a hollow skull. The only light came from faint, glowing outlines in the distance, figures, hundreds of them, drifting aimlessly, their eyes empty. Their hollow sockets flickered like dying lanterns. They didn't speak, didn't move with purpose. They just existed in the dark. Daniel's chest heaved. He tried to scream, but his voice didn't leave his lips. Instead, it echoed only in his head, bouncing off the void. He spun, searching for Hannah, for Ethan, but they weren't here. Only him. Only the hollowed. And then, from the black, it emerged again. The hollow one's form towered above, shifting and bending, never fully solid, its hollow face staring down with neither malice nor mercy. Its voice, when it came, wasn't sound, it was thought, thunder rolling inside his skull. "You are mine." Daniel staggered back, trembling. "No. You promised, leave them alone. Take me and let them go." The hollow one's hollow gaze bore through him, unblinking. The phantoms stirred faintly, a ripple passing through the endless crowd, as though his words had brushed against them. And then the voice returned, colder than before. "There are no bargains. There is only the hollow." The truth crushed him. His sacrifice meant nothing. Hannah, Ethan, they were still doomed. Just as all who came here had been. The hollow one wasn't interested in trade. It didn't hunger. It didn't reason. It only consumed. Daniel dropped to his knees, despair pouring through him. His hands shook as he pressed them to his face, and for the first time, he felt the truth of what was happening to him. His fingertips brushed his cheeks where his eyes should have been, smooth, empty hollows. His breath caught in his throat. He wasn't fighting anymore. He was already changing. "No," he whispered, his voice breaking in the void. "No, please, don't let me become this." But even as he begged, he felt himself slipping. His memories flickered, Hannah's face blurred, Ethan's voice muffled, even his own name trembling like a candle flame about to die. The void welcomed him. The hollow one loomed above, watching, waiting, patient. And then, faintly, something cut through the silence. Daniel. It wasn't the hollow one. It wasn't the phantoms. It was Hannah's voice, shrill with terror, echoing from somewhere beyond the void. For a moment, Daniel thought it was memory, but then it came again, louder, rawer. "Daniel. Don't leave me. Fight it." The voice cracked something open inside him. A fissure in the suffocating black. He remembered her arms around him, her desperate prayers, the way she had believed in him even when Ethan had given up. The hollow one's whispers had told him all would be hollow, but Hannah's voice reminded him of something the shadows couldn't touch, love. Daniel's chest heaved as he forced himself to his feet. The void trembled faintly, the Hollow One's hollow head tilting, studying him. His voice shook but grew louder as he shouted into the dark. "You don't get to take everything. You don't get to erase me." The Hollow One's response shook the endless black. "All belong to the Hollow." Daniel's scream tore from him, raw and furious. He clung to Hannah's voice in the distance, to the memory of who he was, to every fragile, human moment the Hollow One sought to strip away. And for the first time since it had claimed him, he fought, not with his body, but with his will. He clung to his name, to his memories, to his refusal to vanish. And the void cracked. A fracture of light split through the darkness, thin at first, then widening. The Hollow One roared, its shadow form rippling violently. The phantoms around him shrieked without sound, clutching their hollow faces, their forms breaking like glass. Daniel staggered toward the light, every step burning, tearing, but real. He could feel the Hollow One clawing inside him, trying to drag him back, trying to hollow him out completely. But Hannah's voice was still there, calling, screaming, believing. He threw himself through the fracture. And suddenly, he was on the ground again, gasping, choking on air. The clearing swam into view above him, the trees shaking, the void beneath the earth collapsing into itself. Hannah was kneeling over him, her face streaked with tears, her hands pressed to his chest. Ethan stood frozen a few feet away, his face white with shock. "Daniel!" Hannah sobbed, shaking him. "Oh my God, you're alive, you're still here." Daniel coughed violently, clutching the dirt beneath his fingers, staring up at her. His body ached, every nerve on fire. But his eyes still saw. They weren't hollow. Not yet. The ground shuddered one last time, then sealed shut with a deafening crack, the fissure vanishing as though it had never existed. The forest grew silent, unbearably so. The hollow-eyed phantoms were gone. The Hollow One's shadow had vanished. But Daniel knew it wasn't over. Because when he blinked, just for a second, the world dimmed too long. And in the dark behind his eyelids, he saw the Hollow One waiting, patient, eternal. He heard its whisper, soft and certain. "You cannot escape what you are becoming." He jolted awake, gasping, clutching Hannah's hand like a lifeline. She held him, sobbing, whispering that they would get out of the forest together. Ethan said nothing. He simply stared at Daniel with haunted eyes, as though he already knew the truth. Daniel staggered to his feet with their help, but as they began to stumble toward the treeline, one thought gnawed at him like rot in his chest. He hadn't defeated the Hollow One. He had only delayed it. And the next time someone pitched a tent in these woods, they wouldn't just face the Hollow One. They would face him. The last echo of its voice slithered through his mind, a promise more terrifying than any threat. The Hollow does not end. It begins with you.